It was a normal Wednesday afternoon at Clearwater High School. The day was winding down and students were eagerly waiting for the final bell to signal the end of the school day. I was sitting in my history class, half listening to Mr. Thompson's lecture, when the loudspeakers crackled to life. "Attention, students and staff!" Principal Carter's voice echoed through the classroom, sounding unusually tense. "We are initiating a lockdown procedure immediately. This is not a drill. Please follow lockdown protocols. Lock all doors and stay away from windows." A collective murmur of confusion swept through the room as we processed the announcement. Lockdown procedures were drilled into us regularly, but there was something about the tone of Principal Carter's voice that set me on edge. Mr. Thompson quickly locked the door and turned off the lights, ushering us to the back corner of the room, out of sight from the windows. As we sat in tense silence, my mind raced with possibilities. Was there an intruder? A threat outside? My thoughts were interrupted by the buzzing of my phone. I pulled it out cautiously, expecting a concerned message from my parents or a friend. Instead, there was a new text message from an unknown number. "Do you know the truth about your friends?" A chill ran down my spine. I showed the message to my friend Sarah, who was huddled next to me. She frowned and whispered, "Maybe it's just a prank." Before I could respond, her phone buzzed as well. Her face paled as she read the message. It says, "Are you sure you know what they think of you?" We exchanged worried glances, and I noticed other students checking their phones, their faces mirroring our confusion and fear. Everyone seemed to be receiving messages from the same unknown number. The messages were cryptic, some vaguely threatening. Others seemingly meant to sow distrust and fear. Another message appeared on my screen. "The secrets they keep could destroy you." My hand shook as I read it. Sarah and I weren't the only ones rattled. The atmosphere in the room had shifted from confusion to palpable anxiety. Mr. Thompson noticed and quickly told everyone to put their phones away, urging us to stay calm and quiet. But it was too late. The damage had been done. Whispers filled the room as students nervously speculated about the messages. My phone buzzed again, and I reluctantly glanced at the screen. Who can you trust when everyone is hiding something? My heart raced. I looked around the room, feeling the tension rise. The unknown callers seemed to know too much about us, as if they were watching and waiting for our reactions. Sarah leaned over, her voice barely a whisper. "This is creepy. Do you think someone's messing with us from inside the school?" Before I could answer, another message arrived, more chilling than the last. "The lies will unravel, and the truth will come out." Mr. Thompson, noticing the growing unease, attempted to restore order. "Everyone, please stay calm. This is just a precautionary lockdown. The police will handle whatever is going on. Keep your phones off and stay quiet." But it was clear he was also unnerved. The messages had hit a nerve, exposing hidden fears and insecurities among us. As we sat in silence, the minutes felt like hours. The oppressive quiet was occasionally broken by the sound of buzzing phones, though most students were too frightened to check them now. Suddenly, the loudspeaker crackled again. Principal Carter's voice came through, sounding strained. "Remain in lockdown. Authorities are handling the situation. Please, do not leave your classrooms." As if on cue, my phone buzzed once more. With trembling hands, I unlocked it and read the message. "It's closer than you think. The truth is in this room." I glanced around, my stomach churning. Everyone seemed equally terrified, sharing uneasy glances. Who could be behind these messages? The possibility that the sender was among us made the room feel suffocating. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the messages stopped. The silence stretched on, broken only by the faint sounds of sirens in the distance. The tension in the room was almost unbearable. After what felt like an eternity, the lockdown was lifted. Principal Carter's voice announced that the situation was under control, and that we were to proceed to the gymnasium for a debriefing. As we exited the classroom, the hallways were filled with anxious chatter. The messages had left everyone shaken, questioning each other and themselves. In the gymnasium, police officers and school administrators tried to calm the students. They explained that the lockdown was triggered by an anonymous threat and that the messages we received were part of a cruel hoax designed to cause panic. But the damage was done. The unknown caller had sown seeds of doubt and fear, exposing the fragility of trust among us. The police promised to investigate and find the perpetrator, but no one was ever caught. The school never fully recovered from that day. The fear and suspicion lingered, haunting us like a shadow. Friendships were strained, and the sense of safety we once felt was gone. It was an ordinary Thursday morning at Westwood High, but the atmosphere was thick with tension. Mr. Foster, the regular history teacher, was out sick, and a substitute had taken his place. The man introduced himself as Mr. Daniels, middle-aged, with sharp features and an unsettling calmness. He carried an old leather briefcase and wore a faded suit that seemed a little out of place for a high school setting. As the students filed into the classroom, they noticed something off about Mr. Daniels. His demeanor was too quiet, his smile too fixed. But they shrugged it off, attributing their discomfort to the usual awkwardness of having a stranger in charge. The lesson started normally enough, with Mr. Daniels discussing the Cold War. However, halfway through the class, the intercom crackled to life. "Attention, students and staff," the principal's voice announced. "We are initiating a lockdown. This is not a drill. Please proceed to your designated lockdown locations." The students exchanged worried glances. Lockdowns were serious, and everyone knew the protocol. Lock the doors, turn off the lights, and stay quiet. Mr. Daniels calmly instructed everyone to move to the corner of the room out of sight of the door and windows. He locked the door and drew the blinds, then sat at the teacher's desk with an unsettling composure. Minutes passed, turning into an hour. The school was eerily silent, save for the occasional faint noises from the hallway. The students whispered among themselves, their nerves fraying with each passing minute. Mr. Daniels, however, remained disturbingly calm, watching them with an expression that was hard to read. As the second hour began, the students grew restless. Something about Mr. Daniels's calmness seemed off. Jake, a senior with a reputation for being a troublemaker, whispered to his friends, "Does anyone else think this guy is weird?" Before anyone could respond, Mr. Daniels stood up abruptly, causing everyone to jump. He walked to the front of the class and pulled a small device from his briefcase. It looked like a modified walkie-talkie. He pressed a button, and the device crackled. "Phase 1 complete. Students are secure, proceeding with Phase 2. The students stared in horror as they realized the lockdown might not have been initiated by the school. Panic set in as Mr. Daniels returned to his desk, his calm demeanor now taking on a menacing edge. "Stay calm, everyone," he said, his voice smooth. "This is all part of the plan." "What plan?" Sarah, a usually quiet student, asked, her voice trembling. Mr. Daniels smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We're conducting a social experiment. How do people react under stress? How do they behave when faced with the unknown?" The room erupted into chaos. Students shouted questions and demands, some of them getting up to confront Mr. Daniels. He remained composed, holding up a hand for silence. "Sit down," he ordered, his voice cold, "or there will be consequences." Reluctantly, the students obeyed, fear settling like a heavy fog over the room. Mr. Daniels began pacing, explaining how the experiment would unfold. He spoke of observing human behavior, of pushing boundaries. His words were chilling, clinical, as if he saw them as mere subjects rather than terrified teenagers. The minutes dragged on, each one filled with a suffocating tension. Some students cried quietly, others whispered frantic plans to each other. Jake, however, couldn't sit still. He nudged his friend Alex, whispering, "We need to do something." Alex nodded, glancing around the room. "What about the fire alarm?" he whispered back. "If we pull it, the authorities will have to respond." Jake nodded, and the two of them inched towards the classroom door. Mr. Daniels was absorbed in his monologue about human psychology, oblivious to their movements. As they reached the door, Jake took a deep breath and lunged for the fire alarm. The shrill sound of the alarm shattered the tense silence, Mr. Daniels's expression darkened and he reached into his briefcase, pulling out a small black device. He pressed a button, and the alarm abruptly stopped. "Well, that was predictable," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "But futile. The experiment continues." The students were frozen with fear, realizing they were truly trapped. But then something unexpected happened. The classroom door burst open, and uniformed officers stormed in, their weapons drawn. Mr. Daniels was quickly subdued and handcuffed, his calm facade finally cracking. As the officers led him away, the students sat in stunned silence, unable to process what had just happened. The principal and other staff quickly arrived, assuring everyone that they were safe and that Mr. Daniels was being taken into custody. It turned out the lockdown was real, but the school had lost communication with Mr. Daniels' classroom. The police had received a tip from a concerned parent who had seen Mr. Daniels enter the school and recognized him from a news report. He was a disgraced former psychologist who had lost his license and was wanted for conducting illegal experiments on unsuspecting people. The police arrived just in time to prevent his twisted experiment from escalating further. The students were escorted out of the school and reunited with their families. The experience left them shaken, a horrific reminder of how vulnerable they could be. The school offered counseling and support, but the memory of Mr. Daniels' cold eyes and chilling words haunted them. In the days that followed, the story spread quickly, and the media dubbed the incident the lockdown experiment. The students struggled to move past the trauma, but they were thankful for the swift response of the authorities. As for Mr. Daniels, he faced charges for his actions, but the scars he left on the students and staff of Westwood High would take a long time to heal. The experience served as a chilling reminder that sometimes the true danger comes not from outside the walls, but from within. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning at Ridgewood High School, but unease had settled over the campus. The recent series of murders in town, eerily similar to the infamous Raven killings from decades ago, had everyone on edge. The original Raven, a notorious serial killer, had left a trail of bodies posed in elaborate displays with raven feathers scattered around them. Now, a copycat seemed to be mimicking those gruesome crimes. In the middle of second period, the school intercom crackled. Principal Carter's voice came through, tight and urgent. "Attention, students and staff. We are initiating a lockdown. This is not a drill. Please secure your rooms and follow all lockdown procedures immediately." A collective murmur spread through the classroom. Our teacher, Ms. Garcia, immediately locked the door, turned off the lights, and instructed us to sit in the back corner of the room, out of sight. As we settled into our spots, a heavy silence fell over us. It wasn't unusual to have drills, but something about the principal's tone suggested this was different. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Glancing at it, I saw a message from an unknown number. "You think you're safe? Think again." I showed the message to Alex, who sat beside me. His face went pale as he checked his phone and found a similar message. Others around us were getting messages too, all with variations of the same unnerving sentiment. Whispers started circulating among the students, a mixture of fear and confusion. Ms. Garcia noticed the commotion and told us to keep our phones off and stay quiet. But the unsettling feeling only grew. A second message appeared on my screen. "The Raven knows you're here." A nervous energy rippled through the room. The mention of the Raven, given the recent murders, was chilling. The messages felt like more than just a prank. They felt like a taunt, a threat. The possibility that the copycat killer was somehow connected to our school, or worse, inside the building, was terrifying. Suddenly, a loud knock echoed through the room, making everyone jump. Ms. Garcia motioned for us to stay still as she cautiously approached the door. We all held our breath. Through the small window, we saw a figure in a police uniform. Ms. Garcia opened the door slightly. "I'm Officer Reynolds," the man said. "We need to evacuate the building. There's a situation outside." Ms. Garcia hesitated, then nodded. But as we started to gather our things, I received another text. "They're not who they say they are." I grabbed Alex's arm. "Something's wrong," I whispered, showing him the message. He frowned, and we both glanced at the officer who was now inside the room guiding students out. The text unsettled me, but without any proof, it was just a gut feeling. As we filed out into the hallway, I noticed a few more officers, all directing students towards the exits. The atmosphere was tense, but everyone followed the instructions. Just as we reached the main corridor, Principal Carter's voice came over the intercom again, this time with a panicked edge. "Do not leave your classrooms. The lockdown is still in effect." Confusion spread through the crowd. The officers' calm expressions faltered. One of them, the same Officer Reynolds who had spoken to Ms. Garcia, cursed under his breath. Realizing the deception, fear surged through us. Before anyone could react, the fake officers revealed their true intent. One pulled out a weapon, pointing it at the nearest student. "Everyone back to the classroom," he barked, his voice menacing. Panic ensued. Students screamed and scrambled, trying to get away. The imposter officers tried to maintain control, but the chaos was too much. Real police officers burst through the main entrance, shouting commands. The imposters were quickly surrounded and subdued, handcuffed and dragged away, their plans thwarted. As the real officers secured the building, we were herded into the gymnasium for safety. The police questioned everyone, trying to piece together what had happened. It turned out the imposters had been trying to abduct specific students, likely linked to the copycat murders. Their messages had been a ploy to instill fear and confusion, making it easier to carry out their plan. The realization that we had been so close to danger left us all shaken. The police revealed that the imposters were part of a cult-like group obsessed with the Raven killings. They had planned to abduct students as part of a twisted ritual, but their plot had been interrupted by a tip-off and the quick response of the real authorities. In the days that followed, the school remained under heightened security, and counselors were brought in to help students cope with the trauma. The investigation continued, but the true mastermind behind the copycat killings remained at large. Although the experience brought the community together in support, it also left us with a lingering fear. The Raven is still out there,